about 5 after, so I think we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Cindy Herrera, and I am the Chief Development Officer for Columbia Housing. And we're going to speak with you this afternoon about the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program for Dorrah, Randall. I'm going to ask Ms. Lee McRoberts to give us a little bit of housekeeping instructions first, and then we'll get started with the presentation. And then after that, we'll open it up for questions.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Just wanted to let everyone know if you've got questions during the course of the presentation, please ask those in the chat box. That's in the bar at the bottom of your screen, little chat bubble. You can type those in there. We would ask that everybody keep themselves on mute during the presentation. And we will have this posted to our YouTube channel later on this evening and available for anybody who didn't make today's presentation. Thank you, Ms. Herrera.
Thank you very much. We're going to talk with you today about the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, and this is the first of 2 meetings. So the basic information we're going to provide you today is an overview of the program. And then in our second meeting, we'll provide you with a little bit more information specifically about the plans for Dorrah Randall. So let me start with what is RAD? Rental Assistance Demonstration Program. That's what RAD stands for. It is actually a demonstration program that HUD launched in 2012. What RAD does is it removes properties from the public housing program. And it provides those properties with project-based Section 8 contracts going forward. And what it does is it allows us to make improvements of the property either through rehabilitation or through demolition and new construction. So why are we talking about RAD? Well, for many years, Congress has not provided enough money for housing authorities to be able to take care of all of the physical needs or make the repairs that are needed at the properties. Today, HUD estimates that across the country, public housing units need more than $60 billion in repairs. HUD calls those repair cost capital needs. So there's about a $60 billion capital needs. Because of the lack of funding from Congress, housing authorities many times have had to make tough decisions about what we can repair. We've had to try to keep things repaired like roofs and plumbing. And in some cases, we've had to demolish public housing because it just has become in such poor repair that we couldn't have people living there any longer. What RAD does is it gives us a way to be able to go out and get private money from the private sector to be able to make the repairs without having to rely on Congress. And so the reason that we're doing RAD, or we're talking about RAD, is because we need to find a way to get the funds to be able to make repairs on our public housing properties. What does RAD mean to you as a resident? That's very important. And first, let me say that you do not lose your housing assistance. So RAD will continue to make sure that you would pay rent based on 30% of your income. In addition, you're not going to be rescreened. If you're living in a property at the time that we do the RAD program, you're automatically guaranteed to be able to stay in a property or another housing unit. So even though RAD lets us go out and get private money, it's still going to get money from HUD through the form of a subsidy. So from that subsidy, we continue to manage the RAD properties through what's called the Project-Based Voucher Program. Many of you are familiar with the voucher, where you can get a voucher and go out and find a private landlord. What the RAD program does is it ties the voucher to the unit that we convert. So, and what RAD does in addition to that is it requires that the converted properties are owned or controlled by either a public or a nonprofit organization. So that would still be controlled by a public or nonprofit, not a private owner. So basically, what does RAD do? This is a little chart for those of you who can see it. If you can't see it, don't worry, I'm going to talk through it, okay? So one of the things we said is that right now, before we use RAD, the properties do not receive 100% of funding. Congress has never funded us enough money to be able to take care of the properties. What happens when we convert the property from public housing to the RAD program with project-based vouchers, now we know that there's going to be a fixed rent for each of those units, and we know that we're going to get that money each year, which lets us plan better for the properties. Under the public housing program, we are not allowed to go out and borrow money to make repairs. But when we convert this public housing to RAD, we can now go out and get private money from lenders, from banks, from investors that will allow us to be able to make the repairs. Under the public housing program, what's happened is that historically, the funding that we've received has not been able to keep up with the repairs, and so we have deteriorating conditions. Once we move it to RAD, we can get the money to make those repairs, and we're able to improve the conditions. And probably most importantly is that if you live in public housing, you cannot move without losing your assistance. So if you were to move out of Dorrah, Randall today, you would no longer have any assistance. What happens when we convert the program to the units to RAD, you're able to receive a tenant-based voucher after 1 year of living in the RAD property. So once we convert it to RAD, you have to live there for 1 year. And then after 1 year, you can request a tenant-based voucher. And if a tenant-based voucher is available, it would go to somebody that's in a RAD unit before it would go to somebody on the waiting list. This is called choice mobility. So that's a real important part of the RAD program. How does RAD affect your rent? That's always one of the big questions that we get from everybody. I think it's important to remember that in the voucher program, the project-based vouchers, which is what will be on Dorrah, Randall in the future, the rent is calculated the same as it is with the public housing program. It's based on 30% of your adjusted income. So generally, you will not have a rent increase as the result of a RAD conversion. However, if you are paying a flat rent in public housing, you may gradually see a rent increase. If you're paying a flat rent and your rent was to increase by more than 10% or more than $25 per month, then you would have a rent increase, but it would be phased in over a 3-year period. So it would not be all at one time. Again, this would only apply for people that are at flat rents because the voucher program does not have a flat rent. So when you convert from public housing to vouchers, the flat rent is no longer applicable. So now we're sharing this with you today as the beginning of a lengthy process. The RAD process takes anywhere from 2 to 3 years, but before we can get started, we're required by HUD to conduct meetings with the residents. Today is just the very first meeting. The intent is to just introduce you to the RAD program. Nothing's going to happen for a while. We have to have a second meeting, and then we're going to submit our application to HUD. And then once our application is approved, we begin the process of going through the redevelopment of Dorrah Randall. So it takes a little bit of time. It's nothing that's going to happen right away. So we just want you to know that you're hearing a lot of information today, but nothing's going to happen right away. It's going to be a while before we're able to start this process. So the next steps, most importantly, is do not move, okay? Nobody's going to move right now. It'll be a while before anybody has to move. What we will do is over the next few months, as we continue through this process, we will continue to have meetings with the residents to keep you informed of the plans for Dorrah Randall. And we want you to make sure that you join us at the next meeting on November the 30th. At that meeting, we will be talking to you more about the specific plans for Dorrah Randall. So that's the end of the presentation. We're going to open it up now, and we're going to take questions from everybody. So I'll let Ms. McRoberts kind of field the questions, and I'll do my best to answer them for you.
Thanks, Ms. Herrera. While we're waiting on folks to ask specific questions, I'm gonna throw out a couple things I know have come up at other meetings that are relevant to everybody during this RAD process. First thing, do I have to stay in good standing on my lease? Do I need to continue to pay rent and follow the things that are outlined in my lease to be eligible for this program?
That's a very, very good question. And the answer is yes, absolutely. In order for you to be eligible for a RAD voucher, You must be in good standing in your public housing unit. You have to be current on your rent, and you have to continue to abide by all the requirements under your lease. So that's very important for everybody to remember that as we go through this process over the next many months.
Okay, great. What about if I have children in school when the work starts and people start getting moved? Am I going to get moved within my community? If I move somewhere else and I have kids in school, will I have to change them in the middle of a school year?
Yeah, and the answer to that is a little bit more complicated. We do anticipate at Dorrah Randall, because of the condition of the units, that everybody will have to move for some period of time. And so we will work with each family. We will have a relocation specialist that meets with each family and tries to determine what your specific needs are. And we'll try to work with each family on meeting your needs to the best of our ability. We'll make every effort to try to keep kids in the same schools. I have to be very transparent and very honest to say that that's not always possible. And those are decisions that you as families will have to make when it comes time for people to have to move.
You're talking about the moving. What moving expenses will I be responsible for? Will the housing authority be paying for those types of things, materials, the move itself?
Yes, any moving cost will be paid by the housing authority. We basically will have a professional moving company that will assist you in moving. We will provide the boxes, the tape, anything that you need for the moving process will be provided and paid for by the housing authority. If there are any costs to move your utilities to
Cindy.
I saw I was muted.
There you go. Sorry.
Okay. I saw I was muted for a moment there. Okay, back to the moving. Anybody who has to move, the housing authority will pay all those costs. In addition to that, we will also assist with anything that you need as far as utilities. If there's a cost to reconnect utilities, we would assist with that as well. So there will be full assistance for everybody who has to move.
What if I'm older or disabled? Will there be any extra help for me as far as the moving process?
Yes. You can request that we do both your packing and your unpacking so that you would not have to pack your boxes. The movers can pack boxes, they can unpack boxes. For anybody who's elderly and disabled, all you have to do is request that.
Great. And while we're talking about elderly and disabled folks, will there be disabled units, handicap accessible units in the newly renovated site?
Yes, we will be having accessible units. We're required that 5% of the units will have to be fully accessible. So they will have all of the features that are needed for somebody with any type of a mobility impairment.
What about amenities at the new site, Ms. Herrera? Will there be any playgrounds, any walking trails, Wi-Fi, electrical car plug-ups have come in at some of the other meetings? What kind of things will we have to look forward to at the new Dorrah Randall?
We're not quite far along yet with Dorrah Randall. We have our partner in working on Dorrah Randall is a large national nonprofit called Mercy Housing. Mercy Housing is our private partner that's working with us on the redevelopment of Dorrah Randall. We are just beginning those plannings, and at our next meeting in a couple of weeks, we'll be able to share a little bit more information about what some of the more specific plans will be for Dorrah Randall.
Okay, gotcha. And kind of back to the moving piece, do we know where the Dorrah Randall residents might have options to move when it comes to be that time?
We'll have multiple different options. And again, the relocation specialist will work with each family to talk through with you what those options will be. You will have some options to go to other housing if we have other housing units for you. You will also have the ability to take a tenant-based voucher and go someplace else, either within Columbia or Richland County or South Carolina or any place else you'd like to go. We will offer you multiple different options, and those will be made available to you as we work with each family on their relocation needs.
Okay, great. What about sizing and correct sizing? Can you talk to us a little bit about that? That's been good issue that's come up at a number of the other meetings too, and we haven't really touched on it here. So maybe you can explain a little bit about that.
Right. That's a very good question because that has come up as we've met with all of our communities. The Dorrah Randall units are 3 bedrooms, but we've gone through and we've looked at that, and we have some families who need bigger units, and we have some families who need smaller units. When we go through the RAD program, one of the requirements of RAD is that the families have to be right-sized. So if you're living in a unit that's not the right size for your family, you will be required as part of this process to go to a right-size unit once we redevelop Dorrah Randall. So again, this is one of the things that the relocation specialist will work with each of the families to make sure that the information we have is correct about your family, and making sure that we do get you into a right-size unit, whether that be a larger unit or a smaller unit. We will work with each family to right-size you in the appropriate size unit.
Will all of the newly renovated units at the Dorrah Randall site still be 3 bedrooms once the work is completed?
No, we will actually, Dorrah Randall, we anticipate we will be rebuilding. And so when we rebuild, we will be rebuilding for the size of the families that live at Dorrah Randall. So we anticipate we will have 1, 2, and 3 bedroom units at Dorrah Randall when it is redeveloped.
If I move somewhere else during the renovation and want to come back to the new site, will I be able to do that?
Absolutely. Under the RAD program, every single resident who is at the site at the time that we begin the RAD process is guaranteed a right to a unit at the site that's newly developed. So everybody will in fact be guaranteed a unit. You're guaranteed that unit, and you do not have to be rescreened. So there's no eligibility criteria for you to come back to that unit. We have to make sure that there's an appropriate unit for everybody to come back.
Do I have to apply for any piece of this, or is this all going to be generated by my property manager? Am I going to have to seek out any information or do anything to start this process?
No, you do not have to apply for anything. The housing authority has to apply to HUD for your property to be eligible to be converted under the RAD program. And so we will do all of that. There's nothing that you will have to apply for. We will keep you informed. And like I say, when we get farther down the road next year, we will meet with each family and we'll talk with you about what you think you would like to do. And we'll work with each of you individually, because everybody's situation is different. And we want to work with each of you to try to meet what is your best needs.
What about security at the site, Ms. Herrera? Is there a chance that that community might be gated once the work is all said and done?
That's a very good question. As part of our repositioning all of our communities, we are working with a security consultant who is helping us look at the best ways that we can offer better security. Dorrah Randall may very well be a community that does end up being a gated community with limited access. It will have many more security features than what is currently on that site. So we do anticipate having much stronger security in the future.
Will there be any opportunities for residents to give their input on amenities and the security pieces? How will?
That's a great question. And our partner, Mercy Housing, is already wanting to set up a time when we can meet with everybody in the near future to talk about some of the design plans and the types of things that we'd like to hear from the residents. What are the types of things that you'd like to see on site? What are things that are important to you? So all of that will be part of the process. As I mentioned, this is the very beginning of what will be a relatively lengthy process. We have to have these initial meetings simply to introduce the RAD program to each of the tenants so that you understand what it is that we're looking at doing. And then we'll, like I say, our second meeting is scheduled for November 30th. And at that time, we'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics that we're going to be doing at Dorrah Randall. And then it'll probably be into the new year, sometime next year. We will then meet with you with some design plans. We will show you the types of designs we're looking at, what types of apartments are we looking at building, And we'll want to get feedback from all the residents on what's important to you. What are the most important things to you that you'd like to see in your new community?
Is there a chance that we'll be adding bathrooms and washers and dryers to units?
That's a great question. Again, we anticipate that Dorrah Randle, because of the condition of the units, we will actually be rebuilding new units at Dorrah Randle. And the new units will very much have washers and dryers in them. They will have at least a bath and a half, if not 2 baths, if they're 2 or 3 bedrooms. The 1 bedrooms obviously will only have 1 bathroom, but the 2s and 3s will have anywhere from 1.5 to 2.5 bathrooms.
That's great. What, with the new appliances, are the units going to be built with energy efficiency in mind?
Absolutely. We're required to build new units with energy efficiency. This also reduces the amount of utility cost for the residents because it'll be new windows, good insulation, new doors. You know, everything will be at a standard that's at a much higher standard in today's world, and it'll be very efficient. All the appliances will be energy efficient appliances. And we've been rebuilding all of our new housing as all electric with electric heat pumps, which are very, very cost effective when it gets a little chilly like it started to get now. So your heat bill's a lot less in the wintertime with the new energy efficient heat pumps.
Sounds great. That sounds really good. So what is the next step? When will folks hear from us again? We know we've got the November 30th meeting coming up in a couple weeks. Past that, when
right after we hold the second meeting, we will then prepare our application package and submit that to HUD, and then it takes HUD about 60 to 90 days to give us our approval. Once we get that approval, then we'll be able to start the more detailed planning process. So we anticipate probably in March of next year. We'll have the meeting on November the 30th where we're going to share with you more about the plans for Dorrah Randle. And then after that meeting, it'll be about 3 or 4 months before we convene back with you to tell you a little bit more about where the process is going. We do hope to be able to, by this time next year, we hope to be able to have a final plan of exactly what we're going to do and have that approved by HUD by this time next year. And then that is when we would begin the process of being able to move people. Hopefully it will be a little sooner. We don't like to move anybody when we get close to the holidays. So our hope is that we would begin that process by September or October of next year.
It's all very exciting information, Ms. Herrera. I just want to remind everybody that we'll have this up on our YouTube channel. If any of your neighbors that weren't here today are interested in seeing it or reading the Q&A, we'll have the video up today and the Q&A up in the next couple of days. There's a web page on the Columbia Housing website under housing that's called RAD Resources, where all of this information will also live permanently in case anybody wants to go back to it. So we appreciate everybody joining us today, and we will see everyone on November 30th.
Thank you all very much. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye.